They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what I served Marcus Thornton the night before my daughter's wedding, that was ice cold with a side of poetic justice. My name is Catherine Wells, and I'm about to tell you how a single sentence from my daughter's fiancé made a $195,000 wedding vanish into thin air before sunrise. But here's the thing. What happened that night wasn't just about cancelled flower arrangements and returned champagne. It was about secrets, lies, and a mother's instinct that refused to be silenced. You see, 24 hours before Emma was supposed to say, "I do," Marcus Thornton stood in my kitchen and declared, "I only want important people there." He had no idea I'd been listening from the hallway. He had no idea what I already knew. And he certainly had no idea that by dawn, everything he'd worked so carefully to orchestrate would crumble like wedding cake left out in the rain. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what I did, and why I'd do it again in a heartbeat, you need to know how we got there. 6 months before the wedding, Emma burst through my front door on a Tuesday afternoon. Her face flushed with excitement, a diamond ring catching the light on her finger. "Mom! Mom," he proposed. I pulled my daughter into my arms, trying to match her enthusiasm even as something cold settled in my stomach. Marcus Thornton. I'd only met him 3 times, but each encounter left me with the same unsettled feeling you get when you know you've forgotten something important but can't remember what. "Tell me everything," I said, guiding her to the couch. Emma's eyes sparkled as she recounted the proposal. A private beach at sunset, rose petals, a string quartet. Marcus had planned it all, she gushed. He was so thoughtful, so perfect, so different from the other guys she dated. That last part at least was true. Marcus Thornton was 34 to Emma's 26. He worked in private equity, a phrase he used often but never quite explained. He drove a Tesla, wore Rolex watches, and had opinions about wine regions that he shared whether you asked or not. My late husband, Emma's father, used to say, "Catherine, you have a sixth sense about people." I'd laughed it off for years, but sitting there with my daughter glowing with happiness, I felt that sixth sense screaming at me. "Have you set a date?" "Yes." 6 months, Emma said. "I know it's quick, but Marcus says there's no point in waiting when you know it's right. And Mom," she grabbed my hands, "he wants to help pay for the wedding. Isn't that amazing?" My eyebrows rose. "Help pay?" "He's already put down deposits on the Riverside estate. He says nothing but the best for his bride." Emma's voice carried a hint of awe that made my chest tighten. Over the next few weeks, I watched as Marcus orchestrated every detail of the wedding with the precision of a military campaign. He hired Celeste Beaumont, the most exclusive wedding planner in the state. He insisted on imported flowers, a 12-piece orchestra, and champagne that cost more per bottle than my monthly mortgage. Shouldn't Emma have a say in this? I asked him once, as gently as I could manage. Marcus smiled that perfect smile of his. "Of course she does, Catherine. But Emma has such wonderful taste. I just want to help bring her vision to life without her having to stress about the details." But here's what I noticed. Every time Emma suggested something, a different dress, a simpler menu, inviting her college roommate, Marcus would agree enthusiastically. Then somehow the conversation would shift and ultimately, his choice would prevail. It was subtle, masterful even. And Emma didn't see it. But I did. 4 months before the wedding, I decided to do some digging. Not because I wanted to be right about Marcus. God, I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to discover he was exactly who he claimed to be, so I could shake off this gnawing feeling and enjoy my daughter's happiness. I started with social media. Marcus's profiles were surprisingly sparse for someone his age. Lots of photos of luxury cars, expensive watches, and exotic locations, but very few with other people. No tagged photos from friends. No comments from family members. When I casually asked Emma about meeting Marcus's parents, she'd gotten vague. They're traveling in Europe, she said. They'll be back for the wedding. I hired a private investigator. His name was Roy Henderson, a former police detective who now ran background checks for nervous parents and suspicious spouses. I felt guilty the entire drive to his office, like I was betraying Emma. But that sixth sense wouldn't let me rest. Give me 2 weeks, Roy said, taking my check. He called me in 10 days. Mrs. Wells, you should come to my office. This is a conversation we need to have in person. The truth emerges. Roy Henderson's office smelled like coffee and old paper. He slid a folder across his desk, his face grim. Marcus Thornton is his real name, Roy began. But almost everything else he's told your daughter is a lie. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were documents, printouts, photographs. Marcus didn't work in private equity. He was a mid-level manager at a struggling tech startup, earning a decent salary but nowhere near the wealth he projected. The Tesla, Leased, the Rolex, replica, the expensive lifestyle. Financed entirely by credit cards and loans. There's more, Roy said quietly. He's been married before. Twice, actually. My breath caught. The first marriage ended in divorce after 8 months. The second wife filed a restraining order. She alleged financial abuse. He'd convinced her to give him access to her bank accounts, took out credit cards in her name, and left her with over $100,000 in debt. The room spun. Does she have any idea? I doubt it. He's been very careful this time. But Mrs. Wells, look at this. Roy pulled out another document. He's been applying for credit cards in your daughter's name. So far, the applications have been denied because they're flagged as potential fraud. But he's trying to steal her identity. I think it's more than that. Roy leaned forward. I think the wedding itself is the con. Look at the deposits he's made. I scanned the bank statements Roy had obtained through his connections. Marcus had put down deposits on the venue, the caterer, the florist, all substantial amounts. But these deposits, Roy pointed, came from credit cards in his ex-wife's name. Cards she reported stolen. And these, he tapped another set of statements. These are from a business loan he took out using fraudulent information. Oh my God. There's also this. Roy showed me an email thread he'd obtained. He's been corresponding with someone about life insurance policies. I think once they're married, he's planning to take out a large policy on Emma. The implications hung in the air like smoke. What do I do? I whispered. Roy's expression was sympathetic. That's your call, Mrs. Wells. But if it were my daughter, I'd want her to know before she said, I do. 3 months before the wedding. I confronted Emma that evening. I'd prepared myself for denial, for anger, for disbelief. What I wasn't prepared for was how completely Marcus had already gotten into her head. Mom, these are just coincidences, Emma said, her voice tight. So he's had bad luck in the past. So he's trying to rebuild his credit. That doesn't make him a con artist. Emma, he lied about everything. He didn't lie. He just simplified things. You don't understand what it's like out there, dating at our age. Everyone has baggage. Everyone has made mistakes. Baggage is one thing. Fraud is. Stop it. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You've never liked him. You've never liked anyone I've dated. Dad would have given Marcus a chance. The mention of my late husband, her ace in the hole, hit exactly where she intended. Your father would have seen right through him, I said quietly. Emma stood, grabbing her purse. I'm getting married in 3 months, Mom. With or without your blessing. But I'd really like it to be with. She left, and for the first time in years, the house felt truly empty. Over the following weeks, Marcus drove a wedge between Emma and me with surgical precision. Suddenly, Emma was too busy to meet for lunch. Phone calls went to voicemail. When she did respond, our conversations were stilted, surface level. Meanwhile, wedding plans accelerated. Marcus had increased the budget to $195,000. Where was the money coming from? I had no idea, but Roy's warnings echoed in my mind. I tried reaching out to Emma's friends, but Marcus had isolated her there too. Her college roommate told me Emma had cancelled their coffee dates 3 times. Her cousin mentioned that Emma seemed different, kind of distant. I felt like I was watching my daughter drift away on a current, and no matter how hard I swam, I couldn't reach her. 2 weeks before the wedding. Then Emma showed up at my door, unannounced, at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. Her eyes were red from crying. "Can I come in?" We sat in the kitchen just like we had 1,000 times before. I made chamomile tea and waited. "He's been lying to me," Emma said finally. "Not about everything, but about a lot." Relief and heartbreak warred in my chest. What happened? I found credit card statements, bills I didn't know about. And there was a call on his phone. He left it on the counter and it rang, and without thinking I glanced at the screen. It said Riverside Estate, and I answered because I thought maybe there was a problem with the venue. And they were calling about a bounce check. The deposit Marcus supposedly made. Bounced. They said if we didn't pay in full by the end of the week, they'd cancel the booking. Emma's hands shook around her tea mug. So I confronted him. And at first he had explanations for everything. Banking error. A delayed transfer. But Mom, the way he looked at me when I kept pushing. It was like I was looking at a stranger. What did he say? He said I was being paranoid. That I was letting you poison my mind against him. He said, her voice cracked. He said if I really loved him, I'd trust him. And then he turned it all around. Made me feel guilty for even questioning him. That's called gaslighting, sweetheart. I know. Emma wiped her eyes. I know what it is. I wanted so badly to believe I'd found the right person. That I wasn't making another mistake. I reached across the table and took her hand. The only mistake would be marrying someone you can't trust. But honey, you can still call it off. It's not too late. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Part of me wants to. But then I think about everything. All the planning, all the deposits, all the guests who've made arrangements. And I think, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe he really is just going through financial difficulties and he's embarrassed to tell me. Do you believe that? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Come stay with me this week, I said. Give yourself some space to think clearly. Emma shook her head. I can't. The wedding is in 2 weeks. There's so much to do. Emma. I'll be okay, Mom. Promise. And I'm sorry for shutting you out. You were just trying to protect me. She left an hour later, and I stood at the window watching her taillights disappear into the night, that sixth sense screaming louder than ever. The day before the wedding. I didn't hear from Emma for the next 12 days. I sent texts that went unanswered. Left voicemails that got no response. I even drove past her apartment twice, but Marcus's car was always there, and I couldn't bring myself to knock. Then, the night before the wedding, Emma called. Mom. Her voice was small, frightened. Can you come over? Marcus went out to meet with the groomsmen and I need you. I was in the car before she'd finished the sentence. When I arrived, Emma opened the door looking exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes and she'd lost weight. Her collarbones prominent above the neckline of her shirt. I found something, she said, leading me to her laptop. On the screen was an email thread Emma had discovered on their shared iCloud account. Marcus had been communicating with someone named Dimitri about liquidating assets after the wedding. There were references to Emma's inheritance from her father, Money I'd put in trust for her that would become fully accessible once she married. He's been planning this from the beginning, Emma whispered. It was never about love. It was always about the money. I felt rage like I'd never experienced before, cold and focused. We're calling the police. And telling them what? That my fiancé is a liar. That he's been spending money we don't have on a wedding. None of this is technically illegal until he actually does something. The credit card fraud. The cards are in his ex-wife's name, not mine. She'd have to press charges. Emma closed the laptop. I've been such an idiot. No, I said firmly. You fell in love with who you thought he was. That's not being an idiot. That's being human. What do I do, Mom? Everyone's arriving tomorrow. The wedding is the day after. Aunt Linda flew in from Seattle. Your brother drove from Colorado. All Marcus's business associates. She stopped abruptly, realization crossing her face. Oh my God. His business associates. Mom, he's been telling everyone he's some big-shot investor. What if this whole wedding is about maintaining that illusion? What if he needs it to work out some business deal? Thought occurred to me, cold and clear. Emma, do you still want to marry him? God, no. I can't even stand to look at him. Then we're not calling off the wedding, I said slowly. We're going to let him think everything is fine. And tomorrow night, we're going to find out exactly what he's planning. Set up. The next morning, I showed up at the Riverside estate like a woman on a mission. I'd barely slept, my mind working through scenarios, possibilities, and the considerable risk we were taking. Marcus was there, supervising the setup with the kind of manic energy that suggested he was barely holding it together. When he saw me, his face flickered through several expressions before settling on forced warmth. Catherine, I didn't expect to see you until tonight. Mother of the bride duties, I said brightly. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. His smile tightened. Everything is under control. Bet it was. I wandered through the estate, noting the flowers that cost $15,000, the imported linens, the champagne tower that would make Gatsby weep. All of it charged to credit cards that would never be paid, or worse, to cards in names that weren't his. That afternoon Roy Henderson called. I've been doing more digging. You're going to want to hear this. I stepped away to a quiet corner as Roy explained what he'd uncovered. Marcus had indeed been using the wedding to attract investors for a fraudulent cryptocurrency scheme. Several of the business associates on the guest list had already wired him money based on promises of astronomical returns. There's more, Roy said. I found evidence he's planning to leave the country. He's got a flight booked to the Cayman Islands, departing 3 days after the wedding. One-way ticket. What about Emma? No ticket for her. Mrs. Wells, I think once he has access to her inheritance and whatever else he can extract, he's going to disappear. I thanked Roy and ended the call, my hands shaking with fury. That evening, I returned to the estate for the rehearsal dinner. Emma played her part perfectly. Smiling, laughing, the excited bride. But I could see the fear in her eyes every time Marcus touched her. After dinner, I lingered, pretending to coordinate with the caterer. That's when I heard Marcus in the hallway, talking on his phone. I ducked into a side room, door cracked open. Told you everything's on track, Marcus was saying. After tomorrow, we're golden. I'll have access to the trust fund, the insurance policies will be in place, and the investors will keep funding the account. By Monday, I'll be in Georgetown, and they can all figure out they've been had. He laughed at something the person on the other end said. The girl. She's useful for now. After that. He made a dismissive sound. There are always more girls. But this score. This is the big one, Dimitri. This sets me up for life. I stood frozen, recording every word on my phone. Don't worry about the mother, Marcus continued. She's suspicious, but what's she going to do? Call off her daughter's $195,000 wedding the night before? Everyone's already here. The pressure's on. Emma won't back out now. She's too worried about embarrassing herself. His voice faded as he walked away, and I stood there in the dark, that recording worth more than gold. The conversation in my kitchen. I texted Emma. Come to my house. Don't tell Marcus. She arrived 20 minutes later. I played her the recording. Emma's face went white, then red, then white again. He was talking about me like I'm nothing. Because to him you are nothing. You're Mark. A means to an end. I grabbed her hands. But sweetheart, we can end this. Right now. Tonight. How? I outlined the plan I'd been forming all evening. It was risky, possibly crazy, but it would work. Had to work. We spent the next 2 hours making phone calls, sending emails, and setting things in motion. Roy Henderson came over with contracts and legal documents. Emma's lawyer joined us via video call. And slowly, piece by piece, we dismantled Marcus Thornton's con. At midnight, Marcus came looking for Emma. I heard his car in the driveway. Emma, baby, he called, walking in without knocking. We should get to bed. Big day tomorrow. He found me in the kitchen alone. Where's Emma? She'll be here, I said calmly. Would you like some coffee? No, Catherine, is everything okay? You're acting strange. Am I? I poured myself a cup. I'm just thinking about tomorrow. About how much effort you've put into this wedding. Something flickered in his eyes. Well, Emma deserves the best. She does. She absolutely does. I sipped my coffee. That's why I've been going over the guest list. Making sure we got everyone. The guest list is final. Right, but I was thinking, you've invited so many people. Business associates, friends, family. Pause. Speaking of which, your parents still haven't RSVP'd. His jaw tightened. They're traveling. Of course. Europe, wasn't it? Smiled. It's just that Emma was hoping to meet them before the wedding. She tried to call them at the number you gave her, but it was disconnected. They probably changed numbers while abroad. Probably. I set down my coffee cup. Marcus, let me ask you something. What did you mean when you said you only want important people at the wedding? His face went carefully blank. I don't remember saying that. Really? Because I could have sworn I heard you on the phone earlier, talking about how you only want important people there. People who matter to your... What did you call it? Your score. The mask dropped. Just for a second I saw the real Marcus Thornton. Cold, calculating, and completely devoid of the charm he usually wore like cologne. You were listening. I was. Did you tell Emma? What do you think? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. It doesn't matter. The wedding is tomorrow. Everything's paid for, everyone's here. Even if Emma has doubts, she won't call it off. The humiliation would kill her. You're right about one thing, I said. Everyone is here. Your investors, your business associates, everyone you've been conning. His eyes narrowed. What did you do? Me. Nothing yet. But hypothetically speaking, if someone were to say, send evidence of fraud to the FBI, and alert all those investors that they'd been scammed, and ensure that by morning every vendor, every venue, and every guest knew exactly who Marcus Thornton really is. I shrugged. Hypothetically, that would make for a very different kind of wedding day. Marcus's face flushed red. You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other across my kitchen island, and I saw him calculating, trying to figure out his next move. That's when Emma walked in from the living room, where she'd been listening. It's over, Marcus, she said quietly. I know everything. The lies, the fraud, the plan to steal my inheritance and disappear. It's all over. Baby, listen. Don't. Her voice was steel. I've already called off the wedding. The guests have been notified. The vendors have been paid what they're actually owed, which, by the way, is less than half of what you told me they cost. Marcus's face went from red to pale. You can't do this. I can, and I did. Emma stepped closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. Right now. And you're never going to contact me again. Because if you do, my mother has recorded evidence of your fraud, and she will give it to the FBI. The only reason she's not doing it right now is because I asked her not to. Because despite everything, I don't want to see you in prison. I just want you gone. The deposits. The legitimate deposits that were actually paid have been refunded. The fraudulent ones are being reported. Your choice whether you want to stick around to deal with that. Marcus looked between us, and I saw the moment he realized he'd lost. His shoulders sagged, the last of his charm evaporating. You're making a huge mistake, he said to Emma. We could have had everything. No, Emma replied. You could have had everything. I would have had nothing but debt and heartbreak. He left without another word. We watched his Tesla, leased, overdue, probably about to be repossessed, drive away into the night. Emma turned to me, and for the first time in months, she looked like my daughter again. Scared, exhausted, but free. What happens now? She asked. Now. I pulled her into a hug. Now we deal with the fallout. Together. By sunrise, the $195,000 wedding had completely vanished. The Riverside estate was empty, silent. The flowers were returned, the champagne shipped back. The 12-piece orchestra paid a cancellation fee that was a fraction of their original cost. Marcus's business associates started calling around 6 a.m. Some were angry, demanding to know where their money was. Others sounded scared. They'd mortgaged their homes, depleted their savings, based on Marcus's promises. Roy Henderson helped Emma file a police report. The FBI's fraud division was already investigating Marcus for the credit card schemes, and the information we provided added to their case. Emma's friends and family were incredible. Instead of judgment, there was support. Aunt Linda, who'd flown in from Seattle, made breakfast while Emma fielded phone calls. Her cousins started a group chat to spread the word about what happened, warning others in case Marcus tried his con elsewhere. My brother, who'd driven from Colorado, wanted to hunt Marcus down personally. It took all of us to convince him that Emma was better off just letting it go. But he hurt her, my brother insisted. He needs to pay. He will, Emma said quietly. His whole house of cards is collapsing. The police are looking for him. His investors are threatening lawsuits. He's probably already left the state. She managed a small smile. Besides, the best revenge is living well. And I'm going to do exactly that. In the end, the real cost of the almost wedding wasn't financial. We'd lost some money on non-refundable deposits, maybe $15,000 total. The venue was understanding, the vendors sympathetic. Most of the elaborate expenses Marcus had claimed turned out to be inflated or entirely fabricated. The real cost was trust. Emma had to rebuild her confidence in her own judgment. She had to learn to trust her instincts again, to believe she deserved someone who valued her for who she was, not what she could provide. I blamed myself for not pushing harder earlier. But Emma reminded me that she'd needed to see the truth for herself. If I'd forced the issue, she might have doubled down, married him out of spite or stubbornness. Sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is letting them make their own mistakes, and being there when they need help fixing them. 6 months later, Emma moved back in with me for a few months. We spent evenings talking like we used to before Marcus. She started therapy, working through the manipulation and gaslighting. She reconnected with old friends, rebuilt the life Marcus had systematically dismantled. Roy Henderson called one day with news. Marcus Thornton had been arrested at the Miami airport, trying to board a flight to Grand Cayman with $200,000 in cash and 4 different passports. The FBI wants to know if Emma will testify, Roy said. She agreed without hesitation. At the trial, Emma was calm, clear, devastating in her testimony. Marcus's lawyer tried to paint her as a vindictive ex-fiancé, but the evidence was overwhelming. Credit card fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, money laundering. The jury convicted him on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. As we left the courthouse, a woman approached us hesitantly. She was in her early 30s, nervous. "Are you Emma Wells?" she asked. "Yes. I'm Jessica. I was Marcus's second wife." She swallowed hard. "I just wanted to say thank you. For testifying. For making sure he couldn't do this to anyone else." Emma took her hand. "I'm so sorry for what he put you through. We're survivors," Jessica said simply. "Both of us." They exchanged numbers. 2 women connected by the damage one man had caused, finding strength in their shared experience. 2 years later, Emma is engaged again. This time to David, a high school teacher who makes her laugh and respects her boundaries and treats her like she hung the moon. I liked him from the first time I met him, not because he's perfect but because he's genuine. What you see is what you get, no hidden agendas, no secret plans. The wedding will be small, intimate. Just family and close friends, at a bed and breakfast in Vermont. Emma's wearing her grandmother's dress, and she asked me to walk her down the aisle. "Dad would have done it," she said, "but since he can't be there, I want you." Cried, of course. Sometimes Emma and I talk about that night in my kitchen, when Marcus stood there and revealed his true colors. We talk about how close she came to making the biggest mistake of her life. "You saved me," she says. But I always correct her. "You saved yourself. I just held the flashlight so you could see in the dark." Here's what I learned from the wedding that wasn't. Trust your instincts, even when they're inconvenient. Even when everyone else thinks you're being paranoid or overprotective. That little voice in your head that says something's wrong is usually right. I learned that love shouldn't cost you your sense of self. It shouldn't isolate you from the people who care about you. And it should never, ever make you question your own reality. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's self-destruction. Even when they hate you for it. Even when it feels like you're losing them. Because real love means being there not just for the celebrations, but for the interventions. But mostly, I learned that my daughter is stronger than either of us knew. She walked through fire and came out forged in steel. She learned to recognize red flags, to value herself, to demand better. And that $195,000 wedding that disappeared by sunrise? Best money I never spent. Because Emma got something more valuable than a perfect wedding day. She got a second chance. Clear path forward. And the knowledge that she could trust herself to make the right choice, even when it's the hardest choice. Marcus Thornton is in prison now, where he belongs. His con is over. But the women he tried to destroy, we're still here. We're thriving. And we're making sure our stories are told, so the next potential victim sees the warning signs before it's too late. If you're listening to this and something about your relationship feels off, if your partner isolates you, controls you, lies to you, or makes you doubt your own perception of reality, please reach out. Talk to someone you trust. Do your research. Listen to that voice inside that's trying to warn you. Because the best defense against a con artist isn't suspicion or cynicism. It's trusting yourself. It's believing you deserve someone who treats you with honesty, respect, and genuine love. And if you're a parent watching your child head toward disaster, don't give up. Be persistent. Be patient. And when they're ready, be there with the truth, with evidence, and with unconditional love. The wedding that wasn't happened 2 years ago, but I think about it every day. Not with regret, but with gratitude. Grateful that Emma saw the truth in time. Grateful that we caught Marcus before he could do real damage. Grateful that out of something that could have destroyed my daughter came a story of resilience, strength, and survival. As for Marcus Thornton's declaration that he only wanted important people at the wedding, he was right about one thing. The important people were there that night in my kitchen. Emma and me. Mother and daughter. Survivors and truth-tellers. And when the sun rose the next morning on the space where a wedding should have been, we were still standing. Together. Stronger than before. That's a better ending than any wedding could have given us. If you or someone you know is experiencing manipulation, financial abuse, or coercive control in a relationship, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. 1-800-799-7233, the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. IC3.gov, local law enforcement and licensed therapists. Remember, you deserve to be loved, not controlled. You deserve truth, not manipulation. And it's never too late to choose yourself. Now if you like the content, then subscribe the channel and comment for the next interesting story.